Welcome back, everybody. My name's Jason Lowe. You can call me J Lowe, and we are in another AI Diatribe episode. Today, this time, I have as my special guest my friend Brad Reynolds, who happens to be the Chief Strategy Officer and Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence for a company called Expedient. Now, for those that aren't aware of what Expedient is or what they do, Expedient is a leading provider of cloud and data center infrastructure as a service. They help businesses modernize their IT operations through a mix of on-prem, off-prem, and hybrid cloud solutions with a strong focus on security, scalability, and performance. They also help organizations accelerate digital transformation, whatever that means, which is just about everything these days, right? And recently they've made waves with AI Control. By the way, that's spelled AI capital CTRL, like the control button on your keyboard, AI Control, a private company specific generative AI platform that brings the power of large language models like ChatGPT and others, I might add, securely into the enterprise environments. Welcome, Brad. It's always great to see your face.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
Let's dive in a little bit on you because, there's nothing more fun than putting you on the spot initially. So tell me a little bit about your journey into the tech space and what specifically led you to start really focusing on AI and what it is about AI that made you want to go there.
Yeah, so always been kind of a nerd, building video games and all that type of stuff when I was little. And so went to college, studied computer science at some super nerdy school, dropped out because the internet was taking off. And it was like, okay, I'm all over the internet. I'm using it. I'm coding on it. I think this is the thing. This is the next thing. And my parents were like, "What are you doing? Like, you have a full ride to school. You don't have to pay for anything. You need to get a college degree. What is this internet thing? What's an email address? Like all that stuff." And I'm just like, I see it. Like this is where things are going. And so I dropped out and started working at internet service provider, built that up as an employee, CTO, sold it, consulted, and then ended up founding a variety of internet companies and SaaS companies as an entrepreneur after that. So one of them was Expedient that I've come back to work at now. But I kind of look at it I'm like 46 now, I think. Like I'm old enough where I don't exactly know my age, but I look at it and I'm like, okay, if I started working when I was like 19 and I'm 46 now, the internet and the distribution mechanism of that kind of was the first half of my career. Second half of my career, I see the same thing maybe times 10 or 100 that I saw in 1997 when I started, going to work in commercial internet. It's AI. And my wife actually asked me, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when I was like, didn't have a company. Well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I like this AI stuff, but like I'm old now. Like AI is everybody's young doing it and it's super nerdy and I don't have, a deep data science capability. She's like, well, just do it. Like just get out of the house. And I'm like, sweet, I'm going to start doing that and figuring it out. And at that point, like 5 years ago, I was doing AI consulting, but AI consulting is a little different than it is now. It was more like, hey, let's build some specific models, like machine learning models to do things like patient readmittance at a hospital. So very PhD level data science, which I'm not either of those, but I can fake it enough and, be able to kind of learn on the uptake and start doing projects like that. And then whenever ChatGPT 3 came out and people like everybody immediately grasped that AI is now no longer just the domain of, kind of eggheads, that CEOs were getting it, kind of the whole equation flipped. And the equation flipped to like, hey, there's a lot of business value here versus, hey, we're going to solve these kind of data sciencey problems. So that happened. I was like, okay, well, I can consult on that too. And what I was realizing is that there's just so much changing going on that I didn't know exactly where things were going to go, but I knew I wanted to have a lot more scale than a guy with some folks helping his consulting, but basically hanging out a shingle with a couple of people.
Yeah.
And so I reapproached Expedient, the company that I had built in 2001 and sold, in the mid 2000s. I said, hey, you guys are a big infrastructure company. I don't know exactly where this AI stuff's going to go. I just know that you're going to have an AI offering and I can build it for you guys. And you have a large customer base, enterprise uses. And the thought initially was, let's take AI private and say we'll host models locally, we'll host data locally, and give our clients access to their enterprise data in a local environment where there's private model and private data, everything's secure and safe and all that type of stuff. Didn't end up evolving that way,
Hmm.
but that was the initial thesis of when I came back to Expedient and started building AI. But it's definitely, I get to see a lot of different companies and their use cases, which to me is the most interesting part. It's like, how are people actually getting value out of it versus anytime you're coming up with a business plan in a dark room by yourself, you're kind of like, well, I think I know what the market says. And I would say that the big benefit now is like, I know where the market's going because I see what people are getting value out of and what they're not getting value out of. Like private model right today, not really a valuable thing, but I think it could actually be a phenomenally valuable thing in a couple of years for a variety of reasons.
All right, so I have a little bit of a follow-up question there because I'm kind of curious. Your position, Brad, it's rather interesting because you're a CSO, so you're affecting the strategy of the company, but you're also a vice president of AI. So how do you balance these strategy factors with actually driving AI innovation, or do you see them as complementary or maybe even parallel efforts?
Yeah, I would say you probably just have to figure out what the priority is. So for me, I look at kind of just the future of my personal career as the next 20 years is going to be all AI. Don't know exactly how or where or what, but it feels like that's the investment that's going to become 100x. The other stuff, which is like, what's the grand product mix and where does AI fit into it? And what about the corp dev stuff? Like all the other CSO stuff, important for the business, but to me is secondary because the primary purpose inside of Expedient is to build up this AI P&L and show that, hey, we've got some innovative product suites that can solve this for you. And so if I'm focusing too much on the corp dev, I think it's like I'm losing the true strategy. And the true strategy for any company is, what's the new stuff that I'm doing that is going to show our customer base that we're progressive and we're going to lead them into the future versus just focusing on stuff that we do really well, but might be, a pattern that's 10 years old. Just cloud by itself is something that's relatively trodden in terms of people understand it. They understand what some of the advantages. They might not have fully transitioned to it, but it's a known element. Whereas AI is the Wild West. And so people are trying to figure it out. And how are you going to solve this for me? So I kind of look at it as, what's the differential value prop that you offer as a company? And certainly Expedient is not an AI company, but the AI basket gives us a differentiator out in the market, and an area that we can kind of grow with our clients. So I look at that as priority one, and kind of the broader CSO stuff as priority two. And so I always use this kind of metaphor of, you have 100 pennies and you've got different buckets you can put them in. How many pennies are you putting into the different buckets? And that's where you should be investing your time. So for me, AI versus CSO is probably 60-40 or 70-30. Because if I don't do the AI stuff well, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like, what's the strategy? So, but I enjoy both of them. And certainly the broader company stuff allows me to influence a lot kind of wider aspects of the business.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, Expedient isn't necessarily an AI company. However, everything that Expedient does is the framework and the architecture and the surrounding and everything that could literally enable and make AI tools possible. So I guess if you're not an AI company, you're definitely an AI enabler. Let's put it that way. So I would like to actually, okay, for everybody that's listening, and Brad already knows this because I told him this, these podcast episodes, we do not like to make them commercials. Commercials is just not the way to go. That's what we don't want to do. We want to have a good general enough conversation that is of value to everyone. But I think there's something really valuable in talking about the control product itself because it is, quite frankly, rather cool. I've seen it demoed. It's pretty amazing. So let's talk about it a little bit. And earlier I described it as kind of a company specific version of like a chat GPT. Can you maybe expand on that? Maybe tell us a little bit more about not only the core functionalities, but maybe even something a little peripheral, some of those things that differentiate it from other like general foundation or frontier AI solutions?
Yeah, so I would say, well, to keep it out of the commercial territory, just think about it as the philosophy of designing a system. And the philosophy or way that we're looking at it is, can we help our enterprise clients get value out of AI kind of from day one? And so, like going from the kind of ROI aspect and mapping it back into the system, that's how we thought about designing it. So we think about it in terms of modules. And so the one that most people are familiar with is kind of like what ChatGPT is. You log into a single interface and you kind of interact with it via chat. That's like a module. So to me, it's part of the solution, but not necessarily a differentiator. You can access it through Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT. I say, okay, great. Like table stakes needs to be in there and part of the solution. Where it starts to get more intriguing in terms of ROI is, well, let's bring in enterprise data. So let's take enterprise data from lots of different sources. It could be locally hosted at our company, but I mean, as we know, as people move from prem to cloud to SaaS services, a lot of your enterprise data is distributed over a lot of different SaaS providers. So the value of AI, so the kind of compute aspects is magnified when you combine it with enterprise data. Those two things together create what you can get value out of as a subject matter expert. Also, it could be the food for an agent force that you build over time. So you need to get that data in a spot where it's easily AI accessible, which is the data store is called a vector store. So that's kind of like the second component that we look about, which is what are the modules that get data from all of these disparate sources and get them in a format that AI is ready to interact with. A vector store is one, but doesn't always have to be a vector store. So that's kind of, it's like phase two, which is, hey, we have chat and we have enterprise data. Now we can enable employees to kind of pull insights out of this memory that we have of how to do business as a company. But the third part, and this is the real unlock. So this would be probably the 100x of value creation is let's use the intel that we've gathered through those early phases of chatting and chatting with enterprise data. And let's go build a workflow engine that allows agents to execute on that data.
When you say agents, are you talking about like actual people or are you talking about agentic AI agents?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just use them interchangeably at this point, but it is agentic AI agents. So you're kind of thinking about it from the perspective of I'm going to use those first two phases, so the chat front end and the enterprise data, to build my recipes that the agents can then execute. And the differentiator for anybody out there that's not kind of knee deep in the agentic AI stuff right now, which is where I am and where we are as a company, is we've now hit the point where we can trust agents to make executive decisions. It's no longer, oh, it's going to make things up, or it's 20% accurate, so I could never put it in. It's exceeding human capabilities at this, like today. So those first two phases of using chat and data builds a recipe for the agent, but don't think about the agent as literally a baker or a cook that just follows the recipe. Think about it more like a chef. You give it the general idea of what you want to create, but a master chef is able to kind of interpolate and make it their own. So the agents, when given an instruction set, are able to deal with a wide variety of additional inputs. If you ask it to make a decision to pick between routes 1, 2, and 3, and I'll give you an example of something that we use internally. So inside of the chat tool, we used to have a drop down that says, here's all the models that you can pick from. Oh, here's OpenAI's model. Here's Microsoft's model. Here's Google's models. Here's Anthropic's models. The average user doesn't know what those models are good for. Actually, the rule set changes probably on a monthly basis as new upgrades happen. Well, all we did was create an agent workflow on the back end, and it now is able to pick the model based on what I'm asking about. So in that example, the model router, there's a set of rules in the English language that say, here's all the models and here's what they're great at. And then the instruction to the system is, given this prompt that somebody's put in, where should I send it? So from the user perspective, it's invisible. It just goes to the right spot. But the agent is making the decision based on the rule set the subject matter experts come into. But it's kind of like almost like a Russian nesting dog. You have that agent part, which is I think the big ROI unlock. You need chat and you need data, because you're not going to just sit in the agent framework and kind of come up with these things. You need to kind of test it and validate that this is likely to work before you go and commit it to an actual workflow. But it's their beta for us. But like, that's where kind of all the thinking is right now, which is how do we enable enterprises to start taking extant workflows that they have that have been in their business for, we're a 25-year-old business. We've got workflows. They've got 40 steps and they're very human oriented, like the way that we solve customer support issues, very human oriented. And what are the right entry points to start adding agent capabilities, knowing that they can make decisions, but these are mission critical workflows. We can't have them screwing up. So we need to validate and kind of understand. So that's where the product set is. And the agent part is the part that's the most exciting, both from the product to the clients, but also thinking about, hey, what are our own workflows internally? What's, is the concept of drinking your own champagne. How can we apply this to make our own business more efficient? And then use those as use cases to demonstrate to folks, because the market right now on the agent side, no one's coming to us and saying, hey, we've got 100 agents out there and we need to optimize it. They're like, hey, we think this agent stuff's pretty sweet, but we have nothing going on right now. Like, how do we get from 0 to 1? Not how do we get from 1 to 10, which is a whole different set of concerns. So that's the exciting spot. So this is the spot to me that feels like the 100x of the internet when I started doing internet stuff. It's the agentic workflows. And as that morphs over time, the kind of army of agents that are going to become the handlers of the internal processes that businesses. Super exciting, super fun, connects to a lot of business value, which is where people can kind of connect the dots, but they just don't know how to take the first step yet. And so that's a nexus point right now that in 2 years will be gone. And so time to work, days is this is the time to kind of make the difference in terms of the agent stuff.
Well, you're not kidding. So I have a handful of comments, and then I'm going to dive into another question. First, anybody who doubts whether LLMs can actually be chefs, just take a picture of your pantry and feed it to the LLM and say, hey, what can I make from these ingredients? And it will give you all sorts of options. That's kind of interesting. But one thing that you said that really resonated very well, and that I'm finding to be a common theme, not only with customers that I chat with or even tech advisors that I chat with, but also those that are in the provider space or those that are actually providing these services like you, is that data is really the foundational element. You don't have good data, you don't have access to good data, you don't have well-organized data, the AI is not going to be effective. Garbage in, garbage out. And so I would imagine that that is, as you say, a massive, massive focus, particularly as it relates to not only data access, but also privacy and security, I'm sure, are probably some pretty important elements to that. But now let me ask you a follow-up question here. I don't want to deviate too much, but I am curious, do you have any use cases or success stories that would be good to share, at least as it relates to the AI control product?
Yeah, so we've a couple of them. So there's we'll talk in a second about the kind of agent one, but in terms of like, we'll call it enterprise search, the notion of we've collected a whole bunch of data and we're going to give people access to it to be able to solve problems quicker. We have a client that is a heavy equipment manufacturer, or I'm sorry, a renter. So they have all these different cranes and things that they rent out. And the big issue for them, or where they were asking whether AI could help, was they have all of these field service manuals and equipment that's being used in ways that causes it to break. And so they had a couple of goals. It'd be like, hey, can we take all of these manuals that we have? Can we make it so that we can find answers to questions? They're almost always in the manual somewhere quicker. And so the two goals that they had was, one, could we resolve the issues quicker in terms of being able to, when somebody calls in and says, I have an issue with my Caterpillar XYZ, can we like resolve it on the first call? And then the second is reducing truck rolls. So if they have to be like, hey, we can't figure that out on the phone, how many times do we have to actually send the truck out? And the truck roll time is essential too, because once those people are out in the field actually looking at the broken unit, giving them access to the same thing that customer support had so that they can resolve the issue quicker. Because the big piece here is stuff breaks. Everybody that uses heavy equipment knows it will break no matter how well it's maintained. But how quickly can you get them going? Because if you get them going quicker, they're being paid to complete some sort of a job. So they're under pressure to get that job completed. And so that makes the client a lot happier. That particular one, we took an index, I think it was like 5,000 PDFs and manuals. Some of them had images in them and kind of spreadsheets and text and all that stuff. Got it into that thing that we called before the vector store, and then having a chat front end so that whether they're a customer support department or the people in the field on an iPad, they're able to kind of chat with it and get the direct information out of the manual. So they were able to reduce their truck rolls by 25%, and they were able to increase their closes or solves within the customer support department by 50%. So for them, it was like a no-brainer kind of ROI, and it really focused on the enterprise search use case, which is get a bunch of data indexed. I have another one, which is a healthcare related company. So in this case, they had their kind of business problem was we have very expensive devices that we manufacture custom. So they're like custom wheelchairs. And we have to get them reimbursed by Medicaid. So we craft these things and they're say like $20,000 or $30,000 a piece, highly customized for their patients. And they submit the reimbursement request to Medicaid, which has 100% rejection on initial submission. Like Medicaid rejects it all the time. And the process for them has been, we get the rejection, we resubmit it with some things fixed because they'll tell us why things are being rejected. And then it might get rejected again. And we have this kind of back and forth where we eventually get paid in almost all cases, but it takes a while. Additionally, we have a team of people who are dedicated to trying to solve these things. And how do they solve it? Well, after we've sold 10,000 of these things in the last 5 or 6 years, we have an archive of data that says, hey, for this submission in 2015, here's the whole kind of paper trail of how we solved it. And what are we doing now? We're having humans go into SharePoint, trying to remember how we've solved this specific issue before. Because at this point in their business, they've solved most of the rejection criteria. They're not seeing too many novel ones. But like, how do you know where you solved it so you can duplicate that to solve it again in a similar fashion, reduce the time to kind of resolve? It was hunting and keyword searching through PDFs for the most part. And so the same kind of question, which is, can you take this archive of stuff that we have and put it into a vector store so that we can get the matches, pull the needles out of the haystack a lot quicker to find out how we've solved this very similar issue before. So what is that? It gets us our money quicker and it reduces the number of people. This company is like growing 50 to 100% year over year. They have to scale this team up very large. If we give them this tool, maybe we can use the people that we have and keep scaling revenue without having to scale the kind of administrative staff to support it and get things resolved quicker. Additionally, with them, because it's healthcare related data, it falls under HIPAA. So for them, I was talking about that model picker, they get one model. The one model is a HIPAA compliant Azure model. And so when they log in, it's all within that scope of security access. So those are the requirements. So they're now able to solve these issues. So I think their average time to get reimbursed was like 120 days. That shrunk to 60. And I think they
Wow.
can keep optimizing it more. But yeah, I mean, they're just trying to validate, like, will this thing do it? And with AI, it's like the thing that they're specifying is like, I believe that's solvable, but you got to see it in action to really know that it's for that particular use case, it's going to solve it. And it did. So those were two kind of big ones that we solved with, I will call it enterprise search. So chat plus enterprise data. And then we did a use case inside of our company. So, like I said, not too many people out there are using agentic AI first yet. Like they get the possibility, but they're not implementing it. So we're like, well, if we don't have clients who are implementing this stuff at scale yet, but we know that's where it's going to go, why don't we just start using it for our own let's take processes that we have. And so the natural path is customer support. And because it's a process that touches a lot of our clients, it's a high volume, it's mission critical. That's a place, and it's human oriented, it's very complicated. So that's a place where we need to see if we can inject agentic AI, but where? The process cradle to grave to resolve a customer issue touches a lot of different people, a lot of different systems, a lot of different stakeholders. And so we're like, okay, the key with the agentic AI is of the 30 steps or however many it is, which step or steps are the low hanging fruit there? And so how do you do that? You talk to the people that own the process. You'd be like, where are the steps? The AI team doesn't necessarily know that. And the one that they came up with is, hey, we have things, new tickets go into an unrouted queue. We have humans that look at it and then route it into the queue that it needs to be. Because prior to agentic AI, there was enough variability that you couldn't just program a deterministic algorithm, be like, look for a certain keyword and put it there. The accuracy was nowhere near where it needed to be. And customers get a little salty when you're routing things to the wrong queue and it's taking you a lot longer to resolve it because you got to reroute it. So we were unable to use technology for it. It had to be a human thing. And so like, hey, can we use AI to do that? Well, what's the first step? Let's go and take a rule set, a very simple rule set, and let's use the chat functionality to say, hey, if we provide this rule set, all the chat is the same as an email going into the system or a ticket being posted in through the website. Here's the prompt, and then here's a rule set. How is this going to be able to route it to the right destination? Is it picking the right destination? And the nice thing about picking out like a ticket router as an initial use case for agentic AI is that we've been routing this stuff for many, many years. We have lots of examples of how things are supposed to be routed. So if you want to test the system, you just take out the last 5,000 that we've routed by a human and say, is this is good or better than what we've done as humans? And so we were able to implement that. And that is now a part of our production workflow. So anytime a ticket comes into the unrouted queue, this is the router. If for some reason it can't route it, it leaves it in the queue. And so we still have a kind of a stopgap. So I look at that one as like when somebody's like, how am I going to do this inside of a workflow in my company? It's like pick the difficult human oriented workflows and then look for the easiest points of entry and kind of crawl, walk, run with the agentic AI stuff and be like, pick something you can test that's relatively small, that has a relatively high return. But now that you've built a ticket router, your next step of thinking is, well, why don't I just bolt on a ticket solver to it? So figure out the same kind of agentic stuff in the front to say, hey, I'm not going to try and solve every issue with AI because there's still like a lot of complex issues that we might not be able to specify, but here's like 4 or 5 issues that come in all the time. Now, if you bolt on a solver in front of a router, you say, hey, let's try and solve. And we have rule sets for these very specific types of tickets. If we can't solve it, send it to the router. And now you've built a chained workflow of 2 things together. But you have a path to grow the solver and get smarter about, well, we're solving 5% of the tickets with AI. Let's have a project to try and solve another 20% and see if we can do that with the same happiness, net promoter score. The AI is capable. You just kind of have to build the wrappers and controls around it. So those are 3 that we think are interesting, but I'm sure, if we talk in a year, the bevy of agentic use cases will just explode.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. So a couple of thoughts and comments on what it is that you just related, which by the way, thank you for those use cases. Those are actually pretty awesome to listen to because you describe them in a way that I think is very important. And that is that you're hitting on efficiency. And what a lot of people don't really keep mindful when they're looking at what AI can do is, how am I going to get this ROI? How is it that this is going to end up saving me money or making me money in the long run? And really, it boils down to AI just makes things a lot more efficient. It just makes things more efficient from a cost perspective, from a time perspective, from a human intervention perspective. And so that is a common theme amongst all of the different things that you were just talking about with these different use cases. And I think another interesting thing is you talked about the modular nature of incorporating AI. Like, for example, the use case of, all right, we have a ticket router. Now let's have a ticket solver. This is a natural progression of adding additional AI capability to these workflows or these processes based on what it's able to do and based on what data you have available that you could train it on to perform effective functions much like human beings would do. But that in and of itself is a little bit of a challenge because I think there are so many people that get these big, huge, grandiose ideas of what AI can do, and it slows them down. Maybe they get a little bit of overwhelm. Maybe they're not breaking it down to these smaller modular pieces and trying to implement something, anything, a small piece first to get them going and get them started. So I think AI just tends to be an overwhelming thing for a lot of companies that don't have people skilled within their walls to be able to really break that stuff down, do all of the analysis, figure out what those smaller low-hanging fruit pieces, like you said, and actually get going. So I'm sure that that's probably a common concern, maybe a misconception that is out there amongst companies that it's going to be a lot more complex or horrible or hairy or scary than it really is when you get right down to it. If you break it down to a small enough piece, it's just like any other task management, right? You take a big, huge project and you break it down to as small a piece as you possibly can, and suddenly you're eating that elephant one bite at a time. Implementing and incorporating AI within your company procedures is much the same way. Let's just insert these little functional pieces here, there, and everywhere that it fits. So now let me ask you this question. So how are you seeing companies approach this decision-making process to kind of incorporate AI into their operations? We know that it's good. We know it's going to be beneficial. We know there's going to be a positive ROI. But I'm curious what you're observing is going through the customer's minds, or what the process is that they go through to actually reach the decision to take a leap.
I think the decision to take a leap is a buy-in to the vision of what AI is, but then it's like getting back to what are the steps they need to take. And so we're finding most people coming with use cases that are too difficult's the wrong word, but too maybe expansive to be the initial. And so I think whether it's a company like us that helps them, or a trusted advisor that can help advise them, of saying, okay, that thing that you're asking for, I get it. Like, if you solve that to be transformative to your company, we will have to help you break that down into something that you can consume quickly, show ROI, but basically have a kind of a turnaround in, say, 90 days or something like that. Because what we need to prove to you is that AI can build along the path to where you need to go to. And we don't want to start this like long Byzantine project that is likely to not be able to succeed. So the breaking a thing down into its constituent kind of atomic components is part of what has to be done right now,
Love
because
it.
the dream is the big thing. Like, and so you talked about efficiencies, and I would say that's kind of the entry point. But I look at it, just having built a bunch of different companies, is like, by being efficient, you can now scale your business better, because you have less communication that needs to happen to be able to scale out. So like the efficiency is almost like the precursor to the expansion part. And that's the exciting part. It's like we're growing revenue, we're doing better things with our product because we're highly efficient, we're highly optimized. And so helping them there right now is like, yeah, it reflects on a spreadsheet, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is not just to make a bunch more profit. The end goal is to take that profit that you're making and reinvest it into growing more.
It's kind of fun talking about the decision making process a little bit, because I think something we all realize is that we like things in nice boxes. We like nice, neat packaging. We like to have a specific, definite problem with a specific, definite solution that if we take A and apply it to B, that we're going to end up getting C. And with AI, those definitions aren't completely there yet. Not only that, by virtue of the things that AI is going to do within these processes, virtually every little thing has to be a little bit customized. And I have to wonder if that's not something that inhibits the decision making process. And so I can't help but wonder if maybe there's not a healthy portion of people that get a little bit bogged down in the ambiguous or less than defined nature. And so I think you said it in a very good way, right? Let's not look at the 100% picture. Let's not look at the complete picture of how this thing is going to be solved. Let's just take the first step. And that right there is probably the biggest thing that is stopping a lot of companies from starting, because they're so scared to take the first step because they aren't completely sure where they're going to go. There's not that point on the map that's 100% defined, that they can see through the binoculars, that they have crystal clear vision of this is where we're going to end up. But by the same token, you've got to start your journey somewhere. So you got to start walking in some direction that's going to inform how you actually get to where you need to go. Kind of an interesting phenomenon. But I digress. I think maybe it'd be good to shift focus a little bit now. I'm really curious to talk a little bit about the crystal ball. Let's tell a little bit about the future. I'm really curious because you are in the middle of it. You are the Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence. And so, seeing as how you're the strategy officer, your entire job is to make sure that you're planning things very well in the future and that you're headed in the right direction. So, what do you see happening in the next 3 to 5 years? What are the things that are influencing Expedient's direction in how you're building products and how you're developing things, and where are you going?
Yeah, so I would say obviously the AI sphere is the one that I'm concentrating on, but we're concentrating on. That's going to be the kind of overall piece. But I think that the agentic part that we've talked about a lot on this on the podcast is the focus in terms of that's where you can take somebody who likes things in neat boxes and break down a relatively complex aspect into a little defined input output box. It may actually do something really amazing, but essentially it's a black input output box. The thing is, if that box is the size of an entire customer support workflow, it's nerve wracking because there's a lot going on inside of it that you can't necessarily predict. You just know inputs go to outputs. But if you narrow the size of that box down to something that's very small, tangible, atomic, and consumable, you can get people to build trust around it. So that whole trust building of, am I going to take this process like customer support that if I screw it up has huge implications for my business? Am I willing to trust AI to execute functions that prior had been executed by humans? You got to build trust to do that. Trust with the stakeholders, the people that actually own the process and not the technologists. And you do that by starting small in very replicable ways. There's all kinds of interesting technology implications of that. So like, for instance, like at the beginning of the podcast, we were talking, hey, when I came to Expedient, I thought people were going to want locally hosted private AI with locally hosted private data for security reasons. Turns out that that's not a real driver. And it was relatively expensive. But since then, models have gotten smaller. The ability to host them has gotten cheaper. We're an infrastructure company, so we're looking at that. But once you layer in workflows and you start calling AI at scale, not like, hey, summarize my email, send a few of those a day or whatever. You're calling AI hundreds of times a minute, hundreds of times a second. You got to think about, and these are mission critical workflows. They might be running assembly lines or customer support processes or whatever. I need to know that that AI is going to behave the same way in 3 months that it behaved today, because I need to be able to predict what that black box is going to do.
Well, perform the same or perform better.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just need predictability because I need to know that I'm predictable and I'm in control of when the models change versus if I use one of the public models, they can upgrade and change that stuff all the time. Where if you wake up on Monday and realize, hey, that workflow we spent 3 months is completely making different decisions now and routing tickets in the wrong spot, or I cannot have that. But nobody's thinking about that because they're not thinking about the agents at scale. They're just like, oh, I'm going to get a better one. It'll behave a little differently, but maybe my email will get summarized different when you're running an assembly line. And so I think there's going to be some interesting things that come down the pike in terms of the need for a couple of reasons. One, cost. Hey, I went from doing 100 AI calls in my company a day or 1,000 AI calls to 10 million. Okay. can I use the internet for that? What's the cost? But version control. So I need to know that I control that. And when I want to upgrade, when I want the better model, I've put it through my own tests and I've validated that it's working. And then the last one, which doesn't happen until you scale, is speed. So it's like, hey, I want my workflow and my AI to be 1 millisecond apart versus 500 milliseconds because I'm going to be using this stuff at scale and I want like absolute optimized speed for certain processes. I look at the business people are getting the agentic AI. They just don't know how to break it down into the bite-sized boxes where we help out. That's where TAs can help out in terms of like attacking those. But what happens is, let's take a 40-step workflow. You pick off steps 2. And then step 2 worked. Well, now I'm going to pick off steps 5 and 8. Those are the next low hanging fruit. And slowly you fill in the parts that it makes sense to fill in. There might be parts that still need to be human related, but that will happen across the company and kind of all of the workflows. So that'll be the phase 1. But while people are doing that, they're also going to be creating agents that help like humans do. So for instance, an agent for an AI expert in terms of us might be able to say, hey, a partner wants to sign up for the free partner AI gateway so that they can demo. Well, right now there's a web form that goes to a human that activates the account. Why can't the sales rep just talk to the AI agent and say, provision Jason Lowe a free account? It processes it, goes and uses its tools and provisions a free account. Like it's going to get there. So those two paths will be very interesting. So taking workflows and making them more efficient with agents, tons of business there for the next 5 years, beyond that. And then making agents. So I'm looking at both of those as intriguing, but then you kind of have to step back and ask yourself, well, what are the kind of deeper like job and societal implications for that? Because we can't just, be technologists and rush into this thing and say, I'm going to replace all of these workflow. Well, what was doing that is humans doing those workflows before. So how do we deal with that? And so I don't know if you read the news article, but Dario Amodei from Anthropic said that 50% of white collar jobs, I think, will be eliminated in 5 years or 3 years, some small-ish time period. And it might have just been entry level, but I thought it was white collar. And so I was like, okay, well, what that would be horrible and highly dysfunctional for us as a society, even though the company might make more profit. And so like, how do we do that? And I don't have any super specific answers. I think it's incumbent upon business leaders to show where the jobs are going to be and give people a path to get there. And I think that's something we need to talk before we get super far down the road with all this agentic stuff, because it'll start pulling out job functions relatively quickly. And we, that's just, we're humans, we're not robots. We got to take care of the community at the same time that we're progressing with technology. And I'm not hearing a lot of solutions there, and I'm thinking about them myself. So that to me doesn't feel as far as maybe some people think it is. Feels like next couple of years, we're going to have to come to terms with that too.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be even quicker than the next couple of years. There was a study last year conducted talking about the impact that AI was going to have on the workforce. And I'm just going to cite this particular study's numbers. It estimated that in 2025, this year, it was estimated that as much as 85 million jobs worldwide could be eliminated by the use of AI. That 97 million new jobs could be created this year because of AI and because of changing job responsibilities and things associated with AI. What's going to happen when blue collar work is drastically affected because robotics is advancing so fast? And really, what's going to make a robot a better, body or a physical laborer? Well, the brain that's inside it. But now we have AI that's able to be a much better brain. So what's going to stop a robot from being an electrician? Not a whole heck of a lot. We're headed in that direction right now. And the crazy thing is that things are happening at the same time, simultaneously. White collar work being affected, blue collar work being affected. You're absolutely right. This is something that we all have to be paying attention to because the impact is going to be significant. But there's nothing we can do to stop it. I mean, game theory says companies are going to do what's necessary to make their bottom line better. Companies are going to do what's necessary to make things more profitable for their shareholders. That's going to have a material effect on company culture, on company personnel, on society as a whole, but it's not going to be avoidable. It's absolutely going to happen. But anyway, that's a whole different direction. We probably ought to save that for a different conversation. Let's wrap this up with something that I like to end these different episodes with. I like to ask people that are in prominent leadership roles in AI companies or providers this specific question because I think it holds a lot of value. So let's say a company is really looking to start adopting AI technologies. We have gone over a number, and I'm a plethora. Let's call it significant numbers of things that companies should be cognizant of when they start to look at beginning that journey. So I think we've already given a lot of advice to business owners that are listening to this about how to adopt AI technologies and the methods that they should use and the order in which they should do them and things like breaking things down modularly and stuff like that. But what do you think are some of the mistakes that organizations should try to avoid when they're implementing AI solutions? What are some of those things they need to make sure that they are cognizant to stay away from?
Yeah, so definitely we talked about one of them, which is trying to solve a relatively complex problem. You might not know it's complex, but like trying to bite off more than you can chew initially. So I think we've covered that one enough. The other thing that I see, and this probably almost puts a barrier to your company should be 100 or 200 or 300 people, but but it's it requires like full-time dedicated investment. Like we're even talking like, hey, we're building this AI product. Should we have people dedicated to implementing AI internally to our company? Because what happens is everybody has a day job and you're getting your bonuses and your objective alignments off of that day job. And oh, by the way, go become an AI expert on the side or think about it. So I feel that you need dedicated resources to this if you believe that the upside's there. And I think until workflow and people really understand agentic, they might question whether the upsides, hey, we give everybody chat. So what? They're going to write better emails. Like, what's the ROI? As soon as you see it, we've saved 5,000 hours of effort and time with this 3 workflow tweaks. It's like, oh, is that the only workflow we have? No, we've got tons of them. All of it's like this, just like this candy shop of potentials of where we could optimize. It needs dedicated focus, and you need somebody who's like, your job is AI, your job is like internal AI. It's like, how do we optimize workflows? Having it as a part-time job, it's I would say it's impossible as a full-time job. It's very, very difficult to stay on top of everything you need to stay on top of, but it does require full-time dedication to be able to maximize the return on it. And so if you're sizable enough where you have the ability to have someone that's dedicated to it, and it could be repurposing a person that has the inclination that you found inside of the company that wants to dedicate their time to it and putting the right goals and OKRs and all that kind of stuff around it. I think that's a better recipe for success than saying, everybody's going to spend 5% of their side time hustling out some AI idea or whatever. It just takes more persistence and a dedication to seeing it through. And other things that people are trying to do is, well, we're going to create an AI committee. Committees are great for getting diverse input. Never really seen them work for actually getting anything done, but good for input. But like the committee should delegate to the person to go and execute something. And if it's somebody who's got 5 other full-time jobs and they're trying to do the AI on the side, that's why things don't end up, getting enough momentum. And so if you have the ability to do it, dedicating people, and I get, hey, it's expensive. There's got to be an ROI. And to me, it probably should be a spreadsheet calculation of why, if we're going to invest this amount of money per year in this person or this group. But I do think you're going to be able to justify it relatively easily once you think about agentic kind of workflow systems. So that's the people part, probably the most important. And I find very few companies with dedicated AI folks. It's mostly like, hey, IT folks, go figure this out. Or hey, developer folks who have an inclination, you're interested in AI, go figure this. It's like cool for like a POC, but not for like doing things at scale. And it's human investment that's required. And you can't have a robot do this one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So really quick,
Yeah.
last second. Yeah, absolutely. Last question,
Yeah.
15-second answer. We know that virtual or incremental CISO has been a thing for a while, and that has proven to be beneficial. Do you see a path where virtual or incremental chief artificial intelligence officer becomes a thing for a while?
Yes. And maybe forever. There's such a gap between what's happening out in AI and what companies know that anytime there's a gap like that, you need shepherds.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brad, thank you, man. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and I always enjoy conversations with you. Everybody, listen, Brad Reynolds, amazing guy, Expedient, solid company with a lot of really great products. I know this isn't a commercial, but you got to say what's obvious here. Brad, thanks again. And for those of you that are listening and watching, or whatever medium it is that you're intaking this on, you know what to do. Hit all the buttons, do all the liking and the following and the subscribing and all of the things, and make sure that you keep an eye out or an ear out for future AI Diatribe podcast episodes. Make sure you also check out the YouTube channel, because there are other video elements that are published there that may not necessarily be podcast episodes, but that also provide a lot of value. So for Brad and myself, Jason Lowe, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.